Last week we talked about the announcement of cosmic storms. This week we're going to go into some more details of what they actually do. Now, cosmic storms come in 8 different flavors, 6 of which we've discussed previously, which are the electric particle, gravity, magnetic, radiant, and stardust. My god, it almost seems like the damage types from EVE Online. Now, these 6 had some text boxes in the announcement trailer, and we talked a little bit about them last time. We can throw all of those into the trash because the developers have instantly disavowed of those and have added these, which are vastly more complex. So they've got a combination of modifiers like planetary, fleet, and of course, the aftermath. Yes, there's an aftermath to storms because just like Hurricane Katrina, when it passes, that's when all the terribleness starts. Yes. What they all have in common is that they have effects, either positive or negative, and generate a little bit of devastation, which can be handled. However, there's 2 more storms beyond the original 6, which are Shroud and Nexus storms. The former can apparently change systems that they're in, and no specifics are given, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's similar to the phasing shift that you can, find on certain planets, and maybe alternate dimensions will pop up, which is something. I wouldn't even want to know how that is triggered, maybe by a psionic entity or something along those lines. Maybe some of those Koas gods somewhere out there will trigger them. And also, there's the last type, the Nexus Storm, which is apparently a Category 5 hurricane that can wreck all of your stuff. Now, of course, once a storm has passed, you'll have to deal with the aftermath. As mentioned, you have to send in FEMA to set up refugee camps and clear out the affected areas, and these are then represented by 3-year-long lasting modifier, which can then drastically affect your planetary stats, like energy income, pop generation, for motes for some reason. Yeah, because when a storm happens, all of a sudden, I also start to sweat strategic minerals. That's an interesting one. Increased unity, increased crime for some reason, and they come in a variety of intensity level depending on how heavy the storms are. Planets can also gain new features, modifiers, and anomalies. I'm pretty sure there will be big sites as well. We'll be talking about the precursors some other day, but for instance, you can find an old complex or a weird capsule in space, which clearly won't have anything terrible inside, or some sort of leader character. Obviously, if you don't want to deal with all this stuff, you can then opt to build a storm repulsion center, or if you're really into this sort of thing, like this new origin that they're talking about, maybe an attractor is something that is more up your alley. There's also a storm relief center, which is basically the aforementioned FEMA camp, and you can have planetary decisions, technologies, and more. And on top of that, as somebody mentioned in the comments last time around, do shield generators help? Yes, they do. So finally, you have a good reason to build shield generators outside of warfare situations in order to deal with the storm effects. Finally, you can also unlock a weather map mode to see how things develop. Now, these storms, they will spawn a couple of years after the start of the game, so this is not like a mid-game thing. No, it will happen quite early, and they will have a set path. They will move from a point A to point B, which you can then see in the weather map mode, and somehow affect what the route is going to be for this storm and how everything is going to be affected. Long story short, this is the Space Disaster DLC, the Space Natural Disaster DLC. And it reminds me a little bit of the Gathering Storm from Civilization 6, except it's in space. In addition, this also adds a whole new world of possibilities when it comes to things like technologies, but I'm also thinking about espionage, planting a storm attractor, especially if it's a big storm, onto an enemy empire could be really interesting, especially if you want to get out of there with some sort of genetic materials inside of a Barbasol can and then get off the island in the middle of a storm, except then, of course, you got off the road and you get hit and then there's a dinosaur, but it's a whole different story. It could be really, really interesting. I'm really, really curious how this is going to go. It does very much feel like something that is an optional tacked on thing. Like it does to a certain degree interact with some of the core systems. Obviously, you got your planetary modifiers, you got your jobs and all the effects that it has on this, but it's still a weather system that comes onto the map. You don't really have control over it at first. Then you get the technology to make sure you never get storms, or you're just only attracting them. And that seems really interesting, but it doesn't necessarily feel like something that you always will want to play with. So it's not like, for instance, Utopia, where megastructures, yes, I always want to play with this. Or with the Machine Age, getting access to the arc forges or something along those lines that are just a core element of gameplay. The positioning seems to be really interesting here on what the developers are thinking. But like I said, I think that it's very much going to be an optional thing. As things will progress, obviously there's the new precursors as well, which we'll be talking about next week, I believe, as well as the new Origins. Could be something that pulls interest a little bit more into the must-have territory versus the optional side. But so far, I'm not seeing anything that I think by myself, yes, I would want to be able to play with that every single time. Who knows? Anyway, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here. What do you think of storms? Tracking them, pushing them around, potentially a little bit of espionage, putting a worm thumper equivalent of a storm attractor into an enemy base and then getting out of there with their stuff. Could be quite interesting. Let me know down in the comments below on how you feel about cosmic storms. In the meantime, thank you to my patrons. If you want to get involved, it's pretty easy. It's like $1 a month or something along those lines. And yeah, just feel free to head over to what's a Patreon and support the channel. I have been away for a little while, but now we're back. I'm going to be doing more content in the future. Right now, I'm thinking a little bit along the lines of maybe some Mechanicus runs. That seems to be like a cool, fun way to go. That or Criminal Megacorps. One of the two. Anyway, until next time, take care of yourselves. And as always, eat Shudder.